So the relationship between workplace and mental health is an evolving beast, I think, especially with the pandemic thrown into it. Our relationship with work generally as a society, I think, has changed a lot. I saw some stats around 25% of professional jobs would be remote by 2023. So even the term workplace probably needs some definition, but physical workplace, so you think about our offices, our construction sites, the places that we operate from, I think they're absolutely crucial in the role that they play with our mental health. And I've seen that myself. So we've got a hub in St. Neots, which is a creative hub. We call it the Momentum Hub, and it's kind of co-grow space. So yes, we've got our businesses and our employees here, but we've also got other freelancers and other people here. So having that kind of blend of different people here is really important to understand who's here, what matters to them in terms of how they interact with the environment. And for us to, that really helps us shape the culture that we develop as we develop the environment that we're in. So it's important that we just give it the respect it deserves, to know that there's not a defined way of building a positive environment for people's mental health, because it depends who you are. We're all very, very, very different. So I would say that the relationship between the workplace and mental health is absolutely crucial. Even if you just look at the time that we spend in the place, let's assume you're working 40 hours a week and you're in your workplace for 40 hours of your week. That's a lot of your life. So knowing that it's the right environment for you is really important. And if it's not, having those conversations with employers, landlords, whoever it is that controls your environment, it's really important that they know that you really need it to be a place that promotes your positive mental health. From an employer's point of view, in a market where your candidates and your employees are driving the market right now because of just the way that the things are swinging, it's forcing everyone to take it a lot more seriously in terms of providing not just the environment, which we've talked about, but also the understanding within the leadership team that mental health is a topic for discussion. Mental health first aid training, I personally believe it should be mandated, and much like first aid is, after you have 4 employees, you have to have a first aid policy. And I know there's some challenges at a government level to ensure that you also should have a mental health first aid policy after having 4 employees. So I think they are prioritising it. I actually do. I'm quite optimistic about it, and the conversations that are being had within at least the small business and micro business community, people are taking it really seriously because they know that it's going to attract the best talent, it's going to optimize on performance, and this is a really good opportunity to talk about mental fitness as well, because now we're starting to engage with mental health in a more meaningful way, and that's where mental fitness comes into play. And we can start putting things in practice that enable a conversation around mental health towards a productive, progressive culture that promotes developing our mindset and building growth mindsets within our teams and within our culture. So I actually believe, I don't think we need to do too much more to get people to prioritize it. I believe the market, especially as an entrepreneur, I'm a big believer in the market forcing the business community to do what it needs to do, because customers will demand it, and consumers will demand it, and employees will demand it. And if you want to develop a great business, you need great people, and the great people will just get attracted to the great businesses off the back of that. So I come from a corporate background. Before I owned my own business, I worked in a pharmaceutical industry, global pharmaceutical company, very, very, very large company, and mental health wasn't talked about at all. Like very, very, very rarely, if it was at all. I think they just overlook it. I just don't think that they at the time, it's a priority for their leadership team because they don't have the struggles. The voices of the people that are struggling aren't making their way through the corporate structures up the chain. And that's a real problem. So from my experience, I personally just think that we need to promote positive culture, and it's great organizations like CPSL Mind and like some of the champion brands that are out there that are promoting it and are putting their staff first will be, the cream rises to the top, should we say. And like a lot of problems that we have within the big corporate cultures, I think that those problems will, over time, resolve themselves through the positive action that the ones that are taking it seriously force the market to force the businesses to take it serious. So hybrid working is really interesting because I don't think anyone knows yet. They've been testing kind of 4-day work week and home working and things like that for a long time, and they still don't have the data. So I think it's really hard for us to forecast what that looks like the future. I think we can make some assumptions. We've seen it through the pandemic. It forced this on us. Small towns that we live in, and more of us are moving to these kind of smaller towns on the outskirts because it's looking for a lifestyle thing. Even if they are working in London, they might be travelling to London 1 or 2 days a week, and then they're living in their towns. And then what they've done in the pandemic, they've opened their door and they've looked around and they've seen this wonderful town that they've got in, full of thriving culture and independent business, and suddenly they've become more integrated into the community. So I think that there is a space for a wider conversation, a more holistic conversation around what role does work, life and community play in our lives, and how can you get the missing community element that you might not be getting from the endless video calls, which are, for a productivity point of view, totally work, and also allow for a more inclusive work environment as well, which I think is great. So there's another positive there. But actually those water cooler moments, the walks with colleagues, the going out to lunch together, all of those little moments in between, that's where you can really build rapport. So I think there's some challenges on building rapport within the workplace. But again, so we as leaders would need to provision more budget, more time into out of work exercises like team building driven exercises and community focused exercises. So CSR, so corporate social responsibility, is a hot topic, and I think one that's scaling now through the business community. And I love the businesses that are going out and working with a local charity, planting trees or volunteering a day out together. So you're integrating the community, the work and the life. So I think time will tell. And I think it's just really important that we maintain a conversation about what's good practice, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and keeping the forum open for testing and learning. And I think as well, a message to those that don't have control of those decisions, that are on the other end of those decisions, is to make sure that you're engaging with them and that you're feeding that back up to your leadership teams, because without the feedback, how do we know what's working? So if you are struggling to integrate well-being into your organization for your staff, first point is make it number one on your agenda. So when you're having your board meetings, when you're having your team meetings, and have it in the format that is, that human-centric. So understand your culture. The way that we run our operation here is a very entrepreneurial culture. We don't really have job titles. We don't really have much in way of policies, apart from one main policy, which is use your best judgment. Everyone works at different times. So if someone's 19, then actually them starting work at 9 o'clock in the morning, they're not ready for that yet. Their brains are still developing. Actually, it suits them to work and start at 10 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock. We don't all have to clock in at 9. So I think one, let's all make sure we're taking a tailored approach to the humans that we have within our organizations. So I think that's number one. Number two, take it seriously as a subject. Mental health first aid training. I'm a massive advocate for this. I can tell you now, when we had everyone in our organization is mental health first aid trained, and if they're not, they will be. When we first did that exercise, and it's quite the investment in time and money, but it's well worth it, because I've never seen tears and laughter more regularly in the workplace environment since we did the mental health first aid training. It just opened up a level of understanding and empathy for each other, and it allowed us to bring our true selves to work, and I think that's a really nice thing to do. So it's not so much around a strategy, but I think look at the frameworks that are already available to us, and start to just make it part of the conversation. The strategy will come when you have all of the right questions. It's very hard to develop a strategy if you don't know what the right questions are. So I think first and foremost is starting with who works in the organization, and then starting to ask the right questions of those people to find out what they want the culture to look like, because that allows you to develop a strategy around that. The same way, and I'll keep it in a business context, for the business leaders that are watching this, if I'm launching a business, I'm putting a new product into market, I'm not going to try and shoehorn that into the market without any research or asking any questions of my target market, doing any field or desk research. I'm going to go out, I'm going to seek to understand, I'm going to come back to the drawing board, I'm going to shape my message, I'm going to design my product and my branding in different ways, I'm going to go back and test, and then I'm going to come back to the drawing board. It's a constant process. So in the same way that measuring your profit and loss statements are, the same way that measuring whether you're hitting your mission statement and you're actually making progress towards your goals, it needs to become part of the agenda, and you need to start taking it seriously if you actually want to develop a culture that enables well-being for your staff. Stress isn't always a bad thing, and actually harnessing stress in a meaningful way, embracing it for what it is. And I mentioned earlier in one of the previous questions around using your best judgment, and as one of our key policies here, and having that as a policy means that our strategies and development of our culture has to be around how do we improve our judgment. Well, putting ourselves under stress in some cases is good for us. So in terms of how do we combat it, we embrace it for when it's there, and we look at using the tools that we have in our toolbox to manage that and deal with it. So for instance, when it's an intense day, let's get out and walk. It's a beautiful day today. You also do something called Get Shift Done days, which is quite fun. And we use the Pomodoro technique. The other thing is just having the openness for us to stop if it's intense, because it does get intense. Work, that is life. Is knowing that people can stop that when they need to, and they need to escape, then escape. Go to a leader within the organization or a mental health first aider, and say, I can't handle this. And having a culture that enables that, doesn't judge you for that, is so important. And that's a hard step to take, but knowing that's the case is really important. And I'll be very open with you. Someone went into mental health crisis, which was really, really hard for us all to deal with. And so what do? Stop. And we get in the right support and the signposting that it needs. So again, it all comes back down to education and developing the right culture of understanding for whatever that situation is. I believe that if we manage to get 25% of all business and community leaders mental health first aid trained, the impact that would have on our communities, on our workplaces, on the humans that exist in both, would be one of the biggest impact pieces we could do as a society. So I don't know who's listening to that, but if it's you and you are in control of your budgets and decisions, and you can get mental health first aid training for your key leaders, do it. It will make a massive difference to you and your business.